right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, welcome in. I'm Alex. I'm the head of community over on Narrative. And if the slide and the several emails weren't an indicator, this is introducing InstantMock. So I'm joined today by the Narrative team, and we're going to get into all the good bits of InstantMock and a little bit about Narrative and some quick housekeeping first. We're booked for an hour, but it's going to be about half an hour for content, and then we're going to leave some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, shoot them into the chat as they come up, and I'll queue them up at the end. So with that, Sam, you want to take us away?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Hatoum. I'm the CEO and founder of both Narrative and Zolve Europe. So first of all, thank you for taking time on a Friday out of your busy schedules. I know how hectic life gets, so appreciate you all doing that. Today, I am super excited for what we have in store for you. Michael is going to go over the InstantMock feature set that we built, and that's going to show you how we unblock front-end and back-end teams instantly, as the name suggests. This received amazing feedback and response last week at Summit when we presented it, so we're going to do it again today. And then Andy's going to show you how we dog food our own process. So that is, at Summit, we received incredible feedback about what we should build, and one of those was a Figma plugin. And so we built a Figma plugin in 2 days, and that was using the narrative-driven approach to drive the development. And then finally, I'm going to show you how you can get started with this stuff immediately, how you can use narratives and InstantMock today. And as Alex said, we're going to keep it sharp. We're going to do this in 30 minutes, and we'll open it up for Q&A after. Without further ado, Michael, you're up.
All right. Great to speak with everyone today. I'm Michael. I work on the product team at Narrative. And do you mind advancing to the slide first? Thank you. So as Sam mentioned, I've only got one slide. InstantMock helps you eliminate delays that we're used to when you think about front end or QA waiting on back end API readiness. And what it actually does is integrate, it creates mock GraphQL endpoints. It's entirely open source, so you don't need Narrative Studio to use InstantMock. And all the details with links to the GitHub repos and how to get started are all at that link. When you combine Narrative Studio and InstantMock, which is what I'm going to show today, you're able to very quickly with teams collaborate on flows, requirements, specifications, visually build queries, and then create schema proposals and deploy mock endpoints to develop and test against. And I was sort of thinking, late last night, it's sort of like when you have teams that are scaling graphs, they're using Narrative Studio, they're using InstantMock. We kind of think about this, a turbocharger strapped to a supercharger on a jet engine. I'm a car and plane guy, so I just love, I love whatever this monstrosity is that ChatGPT created, but a little bit of fun. So I'll jump right into the demo, and then we'll switch it over to Andy, who's going to talk through last few days of putting together that Figma integration. Do you mind sharing my screen? All right, so this is Narrative Studio. I think some of you in the audience have seen this before, but if you haven't, this is a modeling studio, a little bit different than a diagramming tool like Miro, and you'll see that as we start to work in the tool. What you have here is just a user flow with, let's just say in our fictional company, we wanted to add the ability to purchase products online. And you can search for products, browse the inventory, view a product, add to a cart. We're all familiar with that flow. And you'll notice there are some status labels here, which is incredibly useful when you're thinking, well, where are we with a certain piece of development? So I'm going to zoom in on the narrative for searching for an item. And this is a narrative. You can get all the details about narrative-driven development approach at narrative-driven.org. This is an open source framework for how to use narratives. You can start with a whiteboard, a Miro, or the Narrative Studio itself. And I'll walk you through this, and then we'll get into some details and show InstantMock. So imagine Joe here. Ultimately, what we want him to do is find a product to click on to get into the details. And the first thing Joe's going to do is enter a search term, and then he's going to get a list of results and find the product. There are really only two interfaces in this particular part of the flow. There's a search component and a results page. And the results page is from at our system layer, just a fetch search results set of capabilities. Now, inevitably, we'll have this discussion. So you can imagine a product team and a front end and design team just outlining this in 3 to 5 minutes. Someone will say, well, in the future, we actually want to put in a recommendation capability. And that's great. So we'll actually just label this as future. And what happened here is really impressive, because we're now actually able to talk about this particular flow with what's the current goal and then what our future goal is. The other thing that will happen is during a conversation, people will say, what if the user, Joe, is coming from this partner site, or what if he doesn't have an account? There'll be various what if scenarios. So during our 3 to 5 minutes, we'll outline this, we'll take a note of that, and we'll just come back to that. So I just labeled that as to be determined. And that would be a branch or a fork in the experience. So when I go to a more, so let's imagine Joe clicked on a product and he's going into the product details page. And you'll notice a little bit more detail here. So these are attachments. And the attachments I have on the product detail page are a screenshot or a Figma of the design. And this might be my existing design. It might actually be a prototype. In this case, it's actually a React application we have for testing called the Zolvio Swag Shop. And this actually connects to a graph endpoint. It's fed by 3 subgraphs. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a bit. I also have a specification here where I can actually look at some details. And I also have specification on the back end where I can look at additional details. And I'm not a back-end developer or an architect, but I do have the ability here to detail the system out in much more detail. We have a rich palette that you can pull from. And all of these can have attachments similar to what you see here. In addition, these can actually connect to other narratives. So the interaction lane can be an API as well as a UI. So more details there in a future session. But in my example here, I've got this query that's attached to the product details page. And what you're seeing here is this query. And I have the query already defined here. I'm going to take it out just for the purposes of my example. And what I'm going to do is connect to a running graph that I have. And I'm running InstantMock locally. This is something you can also run centralized, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And I'm going to connect up to the current variant that I have running. And this is where you have to imagine, you're a few minutes in, maybe 20 minutes into your session, you put together and added some specifications, you've got your design. I'm going to actually open up this visual annotation tool and query builder. And if you're a developer, a front-end developer, or a designer, or a product manager, this is incredibly powerful because it lets me explore the schema just directly from the console here. And I can say, okay, there's the product details image, but then maybe I want to actually have the description. And what I'm finding is there is actually no schema for description. And so when I do that, you'll notice the linting here that's underneath, which is telling me that there's nothing I can query there. And so this is the situation, is that we're actually building out this page, and we're wanting to actually have it ready so that when we get into a conversation with our backend team and say, can we build this? We actually have most of the query already written. So I'm going to just paste in a query here. And you'll notice that it has product image, breadcrumbs, product title, etc. And in this particular case, product description doesn't exist. That's the example here that we're adding. So you'll notice the red linting there. So If this was the only change I wanted to make, and for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit Create InstantMock. And what's happening right now is it's building a schema proposal. It's also configuring that mock GraphQL endpoint. And this actually will open up in Apollo Studio. You can see here, this is the mock endpoint. And what's great about this is now my backend process and governance for how we're going to make this change can get kicked off. And what you'll notice is I'm still connected to the SwagShop A graph, but I'm actually now connected to a variant, which is auto-generated. And if you remember, I had talked about this SwagShop test application. So I actually have this running here on my machine. As I mentioned, this is a React application served by 3 subgraphs. And I'm going to demo the mocking process right now. So here, what I'm going to do is run this query. And it's going to generate some data here. And you'll notice this data is not the exact type of data that I would want to test. Some of it is okay, some of it's not. And that's perfect for our example. So I'm actually going to copy this endpoint, go into Visual Studio here, and you'll notice where it says P49. I'm actually going to replace this with that copied proposal. So that's P50. I'll save this. And going back here to my SwagShop, you'll see that instantly I'm getting the results from the mock. Now, because this is demo land, I'm actually going to copy some seed data that I had already prepared. But this is not a difficult process. It'll take you just a few minutes to put together seed data, you and your team. But you'll notice that I have, for example, description here. And I will click seed data. And that process just updated my my mock endpoint. And if I refresh, what you'll see is now my site is working and I've got the description. And I could repeat this process, as much as I need to. I could just do like, lorem ipsum and reseed the data, and you'd see this opportunity where that exists. And this works phenomenally well for front end and QA to test, all while the back end process is working. So at the end, that is the demo of InstantMock. You can see then, I zoom out, I've got full context, full detail, all the way throughout my entire system, which is why this is just such a powerful tool. I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to switch over to Andy, because everything in demo sounds great until you actually go down to use it. So Andy's going to take you down a little bit more real world example where we had all this feedback about Figma integrations, and let's just see how that process went.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, my name is Andy, and I'm co-founder and CPO on Narrative. It was my pleasure to meet some of you at Summit and to demo Narrative Studio. We did over 100 demos, and more than 50% of those we met asked about Figma integration. So we decided to build it, and we did it using Narrative Studio, as Sam mentioned, in just 2 days. So I'm going to take you through what we've built, and then I'm going to show you how we built it. So we have a narrative workspace here, and I'm going to switch over to Figma. I'm going to go into the design for the Figma embed, and I'm going to select a frame, copy it. I'm going to come back into Narrative, and I'm going to paste it. As that pastes into my workspace, I get the Figma design, and I've got the ability to open it and view its contents. I can resize, see the actual designs, interact with them, and I can also just ingest into my screen, my test demo screen here, and I can then expand and view my designs again. What's more is I can go to Figma and I can modify my design, go back to narrative, and it's updated instantly. So as you update your designs, these will update within Narrative Studio automatically. Previously, you're still able to upload images if you wanted to go down that approach, and you're still able to do that, but now you've got Figma integration. So I'm going to switch over to the actual narrative we used to build this feature, this integration. So we started a collaborative session with myself from product, an architect, 2 devs, and a QA to start creating our narratives around Figma integration. So we started by creating our capability, which is the Figma integration, and then sort of very high-level narratives on what we'd like this to do. So it was insert Figma design into narrative, ingest the Figma into a construct, like you saw me do with Figma design onto the interface. So I attached it there. I want to be able to open a Figma design and remember state, so that the position and the size of the Figma embed is the same across refreshes. So that was the first step. We then went into the actual narrative itself. So the first narrative here is insert Figma design into narrative. And we started mapping out the moments within that first narrative. So user copies Figma design link, they paste it into narrative onto the workspace. A Figma asset is created in narrative, and the design showing on the narrative board with the option to open. We then added the screens on top. So Figma is where the design link's copied from. The narrative workspace is where we're pasting. The Figma embeddable component is something we're creating. And again here, that was an image before we had the Figma integration built. So this is an example of an image you can attach to an interface. And along with that, there are some specifications which tell, which we designed together to say how the component is going to render, how it's going to resize, what happens when you click, interactions, and so on. And we did that for a bunch of things. We've also got the backend doing resolving links and so on. In terms of the process itself, so we basically went through from a high-level, low-fidelity requirement to a high-fidelity design of our feature, enabling us to all be on the same page to get the feature delivered. And in terms of the team feedback, they basically said we came in with a vague idea of what we needed to build, and now we know what screens we need, what we're building, and what problems we still need to think about. I hope I've been able to show just some of the power of NDD in the Narrative Studio and what it can mean for your team. And I'm going to hand this over back to Sam, who's going to tell you a bit more on how to get started.
Sandy, absolutely amazing work from the team, as always. Cool. So how to get you started? First of all, just to say, we absolutely love open source. A lot of the roots of the Zolvio team come from the open source world. And InstantMock is an open source product. You can run it in a standalone version. You do not need to use Narrative Studio at all. You just go to the GitHub repository, run through the instructions, and you can host it and run it and operate completely independently. Of course, we would love for you to use Narrative Studio. And the reason that you would is because you get the collaboration superpowers that you just saw, the ability to get everyone on the same page quickly, and you'll get features like the annotations where you're building the query by way of collaboration with others. So if you head over to narrative.tech/instantmock, you can get signed up today. There's a page in there with all the instructions on how to get started. So you'll find links to the open source repository, how to sign up to the studio, and most importantly, there's a link to the narrative-driven community. So that is a Slack channel. If you just come there, you'll have access to the Zolvio team and the narrative team, and we will support you. Whatever questions you have, we're going to be there for you. And What I also would like to tell you is that we InstantMock scales. It really scales. Like we actually use it. Well, Ford Credit uses it right now in a central shared approach. So today you saw that Michael had the local host InstantMock, but you can easily point to a central InstantMock, and that allows you to have all the data that you store, like the seed data, which can be quite tedious if you spend all this time on it and you have to do it again and again. Well, now you can share it all in a centralized database. So there is a way to set it up in a centralized fashion, and then you can unblock your backend and front-end teams and have them collaborate across mocks as well. So really, we're all about collaboration. This enables you to collaborate. If you'd like some help setting this up at your organization in a centralized fashion, please reach out to me personally. I will get you onboarded for that. And so just to go over today what we covered, we showed you how InstantMock unblocks your front end and backend teams. It will have a serious impact on your ability to develop software if you're using Graph. We also showed you how the Narrative Studio and NDD were used to build a feature at rocket speed. We built something in 2 days, and we've seen that pattern over and over again in other organizations that we've been using this approach with. So the reason is because it creates a shared understanding, it gets rid of any misunderstandings quickly, and that is usually one of the biggest causes of delays in software. And so by using it, we make teams happier and we're able to fly. And finally, we showed you that you can now reap all the benefits. So we've given you a welcome page. Would love to welcome you aboard. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much. We can open up for Q&A.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and kick over to Q&A now. You guys talked so fast. Nice. So if anyone has any questions, kick them into the chat. And also a general call for anyone who's looking for other integrations with InstantMock. We would love to hear what you're looking for. Figma definitely came from folks asking for it. So if there's other things you're looking for, we'd love to do it. Just got a request for another session. So introducing InstantMock V2.
And I would say we run collaboration sessions on how to use narrative, and we do that live where we'll actually get on the phone and build out a use case with you. And that's one of the best ways to get deep into using narrative and just experience the power. So request time with us. Be more than happy to do that.
And I'll share a calendar link at the follow-up for this so folks can schedule if they like to. And then I'll drop the YouTube link in the chat as well.
We can add that to the getting started page. I think that'd be helpful.
Definitely.
So you can absolutely use Narrative without Narrative Studio, narrative-driven development as a practice. If you go to narrative-driven.org, you'll find that we even have a page that tells you how to do it with Miro. Like the practice itself is really one of just saying, we're going to focus first on the outcomes, on the narratives, rather than a tiny user story on a tiny ticket that gives you no context to the rest of what you're building. We instead say, let's build a narrative, and narratives are things that include stories. If you look at narratology, that's the definition of a narrative. It has many stories. It's the greater narrative. And what the practice aims to do is to get everyone focused on an outcome. So you start with the narrative, the outcome, what's the final moment to get to that outcome. You work your way towards those outcomes. And then what you do is you start to weave in the front end and the back end to add the color to the narrative. Once you understand the story, once you've ordered the story correctly, once you've used time to model your requirements, what you then get is a clear picture of what needs to be built. And only then should you start overlaying user interfaces and backends to enable those requirements. Otherwise, why are you building a front end or a back end if it's not to achieve a certain outcome? And it sounds obvious when I say it, but honestly, that's not what we see in the industry. That's not how we see people working. So that power of narratives to focus you on outcomes is actually the most important thing. Narrative Studio is a purpose-built studio and a platform that allows you to do narratives well, because narratives as a whole are a modeling problem, not a diagramming problem. And so, Miro will get you a certain way, because with diagramming, you can get up to a certain point, but then it won't scale for you. So, please do use Miro, use a piece of paper, use a whiteboard, use sticky notes to create narratives. You can do it in all those formats. But at some point, once you get good at it and you reach the limit of it, then you'll probably need something like Narrative Studio. Okay, and there was another question about the types of integrations. So today we showed the integration with Figma. We've got loads coming up, as I mentioned in the chat, but I will tell you the next one that we're building is the Jira integration. And so one of the big values you get from doing narratives, once you've got everyone on the same page, once you've identified your narrative, your outcomes, and all the front ends and back ends to support those narratives, well, you then want to break that down into work items that you can execute on. And so then you can start to drive delivery from that. And breaking down the narratives into tickets is one of the biggest use cases that we see happening. So we're building a Jira integration to allow you to do exactly that. In fact, it'll be both Jira and linear. And then the other little giveaway, the thing I'll give away here is that we're building everything as an app framework. And so ultimately what we're doing is we're making narrative be an application platform that anybody can hack on and build things on. So you can imagine, writing test applications, integrating into your code base, writing your own plugins, like all of those things are coming pretty soon.
And then I had a question, obviously, from someone, which was, what's the plan with Figma integration and InstantMock itself?
Andy?
So I missed that.
The question is, what's the plan with Figma integration and InstantMock?
Yep. So it's coming. We're doing, as Sam said, the app framework now, and we're going to be able to add integrations pretty rapidly. And I think being able to include a Figma design and annotate it is on our roadmap. It won't be in the immediate future, but it's something we're looking at.
And there's a question there about the integration with automated tests. To brief history here, the origins of narrative are an app called XPEX, and XPEX was 100% centered around automated tests. So this narrative actually rose from automated tests. And when you think about TDD and BDD and now NDD, I like to think of those as layers. And test-driven development allowed you to write tests for units and for integrations. Behavior-driven development focused a lot more on the domain of what you're building, and so the business logic became the center of that. How do you create, the behaviors around a business module? And then the way I like to think about narrative-driven is it's what ties together all your TDDs and your BDDs into a coherent whole, because all of them are, again, just like user stories, they're fragmented bits, but how do you tie them all together? So, in the coming quarters, I will say, it won't be in the following weeks, but in the coming quarters, this is a big item on our roadmap, integrating automated and human tests into a single flow. And that's something that we can also get from the power of narratives. So yes, that is coming, the integration with automated tests, and it will be coming in phases. So I can imagine one of the first things is we'd probably just receive the test results from your code base, and then we'll take those into the app and then show you that and gain visibility for the whole team. So you can imagine a narrative and you've got lots of different automated tests for various things inside it. You can imagine we're lighting up the narrative now with green things when things are passing. That's not the exact experience. I'm just giving you an idea of what the experience will look like.
One of the things I'm most impressed by with narrative is that a lot of times, we're working in older code bases with a lot of skeletons that we want to change and update for something more modern. Great example, what are we changing with Gen AI inside of our applications? And a lot of times, how the application actually works, that context is incredibly important. And sometimes knowing which things we have, which things are tested, which things we know have tech debt, all of that process comes together pretty quickly in teams. Like we've seen it, just in the matter of hours, being able to put together a massive set of changes for an existing application. And in my experience, the QA organization and leaders in that space, typically know the software incredibly well. And so they're one of the biggest contributors in that context building situation that we talk about. And when you think about rapidly building a change and building it the right way very quickly, it's incredibly exciting, even just in the planning stages outside of TDD and other development practice.
Awesome. That looks like it's it for questions. Going once, going twice. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's been awesome to show this to you, and we're going to keep a more regular cadence on these and show off some more stuff for you coming up soon. So stay tuned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.